Hi, and welcome to another episode of Let's Make a Game. We are making Off and On Again, a simple light toggling puzzle game, and this is the 12th out of 25 hours budgeted for the game. Each hour is a separate uploaded video, so we will include the entire process of making this game. I am a hobbyist game developer, so this is not so much an educational thing for viewers in terms from any kind of expert. It's a learn with me sort of thing. This is also my attempt to sort of structure better the time I spend working on these games so that I can use these videos and the time that they represent to learn more about scoping and budgeting of the time and kind of segment the working sessions that I have and see how if that improves or changes my ability to plan and decide how much I have time for. So we've done a lot of work, and the prototype has come along pretty well. What was once just generic default button layouts from Unity UI now has its own sprites and transitions and animations, and I believe looks pretty fun and pretty nice. I really like this. It's pretty close to how I was imagining the look in my head, which is always nice because that doesn't happen all the time. So I have to say I'm pretty happy with the results. And so we're going to get started on the 12th. Now we've been keeping track of everything that's been done through each of these 1 hour sessions, as well as sort of planning out at least the next 2 or 3 sessions and keeping a sort of free-floating set of prioritized tasks so that we can have things to pick from whenever we need to schedule more work for the upcoming sessions. And in this session, we've got a creation of 25 levels goal. And the particular number 25 comes from this level selection screen that was created, which sort of mirrors the 5x5 layout of the game itself. And I would like to put more than 25 episodes in by the end of the project, but 25 is the bare minimum. Part of this task, though, is not just the creation of 25 levels necessarily, and I don't actually plan to make all of them in one sitting just right now, but also to kind of decide how do we take the 25 levels that need to be created, and how do we sort of decide whether or not a level fits in the number we decide. So how do we create a smooth sort of increase in difficulty, make the first few levels sort of teach the user how to play and how to come up with levels that have a smooth ramping up of difficulty, and how do we go about making those? How do we break up the episode, not episodes, the levels that we need to create? So that is the framework that we're working within. And in our notes, we're going to start thinking about that. Thinking about level creation and difficulty ramp. So there's a lot that's been written about difficulty curves in games, and in particular that it's not usually a single smooth curve. I'm not doing research here, I just want to sort of find something to demonstrate. The best way to think about it is sort of a curved sawtooth. That's sort of what I am hoping find a balance for in these, and I think this is right here, right out of these. You sort of want to have a general ramp up over the course of the game, but you also need to give the player kind of breaks, and those breaks are often good places to teach new things or to sort of reward them for a particularly difficult thing. And I think that I'm going to actually put this into our notes. I do think that this gives us a pretty good starting point, in particular because it works really well with the structure of our, or the theming of our game, or not, maybe not the theme, but the sort of this natural 5x5 25 layout, which comes from the actual gameplay of the title. And because of that, I think we can kind of treat each of these rows as a sort of individual set. And that'll give us a little bit of a framework to work within, so that we're not trying to figure out how do we create 25 or even 50 or 75 levels that have this nice gradual ramp up, but create 5 sets of levels, make each of those, space each of those out in terms of difficulty, and within each of those have a ramp up. And I think that would be a really approachable way of coming up with these levels. So that means that for each row, each 5-level group, we want them to each be more difficult than last, but each row should start with an easier level compared to the end of the previous. And that'll give us the difficulty curve that we want while breaking up the level creation a bit, so that rather than creating 25 levels, we're breaking up into 5 sets, and that'll make it a little more approachable. It's hard to say, sit down and in one task complete 25 levels. It's a little bit too open-ended, too unstructured. So instead, we're going to say task for each row, and we already have 3, but we're going to be revisiting these. So we have a level editor built into our game here, which is only available in the debug mode in the Unity editor. And I do think that this first level probably stands. The user only has to figure out how to tap just the center, and the level is complete, and I think that's good. And this one sort of builds on top of it. It is making me think, though, that for the first row at least, and for each of these symbols introduced, it'd be really great to have some way of identifying sort of tutorial mode, like suggest which buttons should be pressed. And I'm going to add that to our free task list. So I'm not going to add that to what we're doing today and confuse the tasks, but also adding just as I'm playing, it'd be good to have a reset button down here to sort of retry the level. So I add that to the free task as well. Okay. So I'm not going to go about making this sort of tutorial thing, but I think I'm going to make these first rows sort of planning for it, which is like this first level, which is a single click to solve. I should have some kind of indicator that the center one is the one to click, or maybe even disabling all the other buttons until that one is pressed to sort of really force the user to interact properly. Either way, the level designs themselves are the same. So this first one is just showing what that default interaction is. The second level builds on that by showing how you transition from one pattern to one that you know so that you can solve that. But we ramp up a little too quick, I think, with this one, which shows all of the types. Or do we? Because it goes right back to the second level. So again, if we added the sort of tutorial things, we could force or encourage the user to click each of these symboled buttons first, which would then show them the previous puzzle that they solved, which they already know how to solve. So then they would continue on like that. And looks like we have a little bug. We want to allow loading a missing level because that's going to be how we generally get to the point of editing. So I'm going to fix that quick, which will help us in the level creation. Just check that the level's actually loaded before we try to read the data from it, and if not, we'll just ignore that. Won't be a problem. Okay, so it's because the level editing is not loading the original set. That's fine. So now we're going to work on level 4 and see if we can get these first 5 out of the way. Sort of part of that difficulty ramp. The previous one gives the user all 3 symbols, teaches them how to use that, and so this next one give a very minor break, perhaps. Let's see. The fun thing about how it's set up is that we can kind of edit by way of playing the game backwards. So that's pretty much what we're doing. Okay, so if we give the user, the player, this, I think that that might be a bit too much of a jump early on. It's a simple one that I think would make a good 4th level. Okay. And then we want to end that first row on with a little more challenge. But maybe one slightly deceptively so. The idea here is still to sort of coax them along to previous puzzles as ways of accomplishing those moves. Okay. Try that again. Okay. This is a suitably more difficult, but not too much more difficult variant, I think. Okay, so that is the first 5 levels. And surprisingly found a broken button here that I will take a look at right away. Can't get back main menu. Appears to be the button is sort of overlaid by bottom portion here, so I think we can fix that pretty easily. Need to adjust some of the way that these elements are layered, which is a pretty straightforward change. And we'll head over to that scene in editing mode so that we can save our work. Okay. Alright, so we're going to the bug fix first. 2 bug fixes. Fix letting empty levels and fix screen layering. And that now we're going to add our new assets, the new levels. Save that separately. Now we're going to work on, we're going to update our notes quick and then update or create a second row at least. So it's time for some more. Okay, so on to row 2. I think at this point that pretty much all of our levels are, so maybe a few exceptions, are going to have one set of symbols or another to make a little more of a complex layout. So we're going to start thinking about it in those terms. Trick here is to make it non-obvious, still to leave somehow in the pattern something that the player can work out. Like this. Save this and then continue working on it. So I think we kind of assume that players are going to think that the symbols should be interacted with. Also seems to be safe to assume that these sort of what looks like intersections should be interacted with. Also don't want to create levels where we end up into a pattern where there's an easier solution than our intended one, so we need to watch out for that. Now, having two row symbols in the same row and two column symbols in the same column are actually redundant, but I think that would be a good way to introduce the idea that on some of these levels there could be additional redundant or unneeded symbols as sort of a distraction or decoy. So making ones that are redundant is a good way to introduce the idea of extra ones before starting to add actual decoys. And again, this is one of those levels where the natural tendency to interact with all the symbols is going to drive the player. But if they interact with more of them, that's not going to work. So that will, I hope, teach them that they need to sometimes use only a subset of those symbols. Alright. Now looking at a level 8. Kind of like this idea of the level where the symbol just sort of points you to ones that you need to interact with. I'm also going to use this opportunity to introduce the last symbol, which is the block. That's actually a light that you can't interact with. Okay, so this will sort of demonstrate that you can't interact with these here. So it looks like we need to disable the. Not sure if we need to disable the actual interaction. Just keep the fact that the light doesn't toggle, but the. So this will sort of coax the player into interacting with all of these. They can. Level 9 here. And now on to 10. Think about a more challenging end to this set. Got a lot of sort of horizontal and vertical based puzzles. I haven't done a lot with diagonal patterns, so might be a way to mix up this tended to be more challenging level. I think that after lots of levels with the symbols, that one devoid of them is a different kind of challenge to then solve the puzzle with fewer tools and fewer guidance. Okay, I think that is a good way to end this row. So, of course, I expect that these levels might get moved around right now. It's quantity, and there will be some time spent closer to the end during sort of quality checks. Maybe that'll be making adjustments to some of the levels if they don't quite fit right. Maybe we'll be moving some around, shuffling the order. But for now, getting the amount of content is the priority. And so now we should have these first two rows available to us. Just gonna update our notes with those additional 5. I do think that if I sit and try to make all 25 levels in one go, of course, that's not going to be a productive way to use a chunk of time. Replacing this task with the broken up versions. And now I'm going to put these over to retest just because I don't know I'm going to space those out more or not. I think I will at least move one more row to the next, and maybe I'll try to approach one row per session, kind of mixed in with other tasks. And I think I'm going to leave this task, even though complete with things that I was intending to do in session 12. I still have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to use some of this time for picking something out of the free task that needs to get done. I think that's going to be updating the level select screen, which is going to start to get fleshed out with more levels now, and sort of updating that to look better given the given the things that it's compared against now, which is the prototype itself. So I'm going to start sort of copying pieces from the gameplay layout so that I can kind of mirror that here. You're going to notice that the sizing is a little bit different, even though the elements seem like they should be more or less the same. So I'm going to want to figure out causing that. I'm going to keep that banner as tight as possible, and I think that's about right there. Be able to have this consistent. Okay, it's getting a lot closer. So of course it would be great to mirror the down press animation in the level select, and we're going to attempt to do that. Because what we really want here is that consistency between them. I think I'm going to keep the coloring difference. So these aren't illuminated buttons like in the gameplay, but they should still behave the same. It's in the last session that we did the animated button press, which is pretty much all isolated to this code right here, which is pretty handy because if we want to apply this to another type of component, to the level select buttons, which are separate from these grid cell controllers in the gameplay, a good way of sharing that behavior between the two is going to be creating a new behavior component that handles just that. So the first step, since we want to take the behavior in the existing buttons and move it over to the new buttons, we'll first refactor the existing place, make sure that that still works, and then apply the new component over there. We'll get started by creating this additional component on one of the button prefabs. Call that a button presser for formative name. As with all new scripts, we'll move it over to our script folder before we open it, just so that we've got it in the right place. Oh, it surprised me that Unity takes a non-zero amount of time to recompile when simply adding an empty script that has nothing at all. There it is. Okay. Get over to our editor here. It's going to ask us to reload the project and identify any changes over here in the resources. So that rechecks our project. We'll open up the new empty component and begin moving these pieces over. In Visual Studio, it really seems like loading one file should be a much simpler animation, but what do I know? Okay, so you're going to move these pieces over, and I'm going to begin by doing that just very directly, yanking them right out, moving them over here, and then dealing with consequences. So when we do that, we of course get a bunch of broken references to things that no longer exist here. But we'll start to move those over. So for example, we'll call set v offsets not in the grid cell update, but in the button presser update. We notice there's broken references here because there is no button or symbol. And that gives us an immediate question: how does this get access to those? And so we're just going to kind of mirror these references. There could be cleaner ways to do this, but I think this is fine, especially because they're going to refer to different things and the different uses of them. And because this component is also using UI APIs, we need to add that import. And now these are still broken, but the easy way to fix that we're going to create new reference to the button presser, an internal reference. And when the grid cells initialize, they'll find their associated button presser component and store a reference to that, like so. And now, when we call those methods, we simply don't call them on ourselves, but on the new presser reference. But because we're calling them from outside, we're going to need to make those public methods. But we only need to make the one called from the outside, setting the targets public. The internal one that's called on update still can be internal to the button presser. Now we're going to give this a try, and if the behavior remains unchanged in the gameplay, then we can make an attempt to apply this new component to the level select so that we get that animation over there. And then if we make any further tweaks to that animation, it should update in both and they'll stay consistent, which is great. Okay, so still need to hook up our new button presser references, internals here. And apply that to the rest of the buttons. We're going to try this out and see if our refactor is operational, and if so, we can use the next 7 minutes of the session to apply this over to the level select. And that seems to be working right. So we're going to, before we try to apply this refactor to another component, we're going to commit the changes we've made to move stuff around. So now we're going to move over to the level select, where we will see how easily we'll be able to move that over. So looks like we missed a little bit in that last commit, so we'll add that with a simple amend. Okay, so in each of these rows we have our level buttons, and we want to add this. Take a look at the structure of these buttons. So we have a internal container within the button for the piece that actually is animated, and we're going to want to copy that behavior into our, let's have the same structure of the button in both cases. And the first part of that is that the button's own image is actually the background frame. In the button, we have a container with the actual image. I think we can just pull that from the other, so we're going to add that right here. symbol won't actually get used, but we'll hook it up just so that everything can work the same in both. Actually, get rid of this symbol and move and instead we're going to associate the image of the text I'm going to work on that anyway. I think what we want is to treat this text the same as the symbol, but to do that we'll need to allow the symbol reference to be direct to the direct transform that it deals with and not care whether it's image or text. We have 3 minutes left on the clock, and I don't suspect that this will be completed in that 3 minutes, so I'm going to work up to the 3-minute mark and complete this in the next episode, session 13. I think we will be able to confirm whether or not this basic layout will work, and we'll just defer the final application and testing across the rest of the level select buttons to the next session. So we've got 2 minutes left in this hour. A lot of times I've been able to really pretty evenly cut things up on the hour mark, but of course it's not going to be impossible to have something unfinished or hit some kind of snag right there towards the end. Go ahead and try this out. Okay, and this is pointing us to 35 here. Just need to reassign that symbol to the text transform. Just enough time to test this out, and then we will be wrapping up this session and completing this work and more in the upcoming Let's Make a Game episode 13. Okay, so I think we're close. I think that we won't have too much more. We probably just need to hook up some of the events on this, and I don't think that will be much work. So I will see you next time in Let's Make a Game episode 13.